Hey, it's Delay, and this is episode 200 of the Orange Pill Investor. I am back at it again, back from vacation. I guess it was 2 vacations with a little break in the middle. Spent some time in Nashville with my son in college, and then back home for a few days as well. Saw some old high school friends and hung out with my parents a bit. But let's get into it. So I sold these 143 calls on Friday at the money. You could say these are pretty dangerous. But of course, I've got these long calls, which are worth about 1,000 delta. And since I have 2,100 delta in shares that are covered, I still have about 1,000 delta, so 500 per 1,000 shares, which I think is reasonable. And the reason I don't just own the shares outright is because as the price of these long calls, as the price of MicroStrategy increases, the delta on these long calls will increase. So these 20 long calls that are worth about 696 delta right now, if the price of MicroStrategy shoots up from 140 to 160 or something, then maybe this will be 750 delta. So actually, the price of these contracts will actually appreciate more than they do now at their current price. And so that kind of brings up something that I wanted to talk about, why I don't really care if my shares are threatened. I don't necessarily want them to get called away, but I kind of don't care if they do, other than it's slightly annoying because it would restart my timer on the long-term capital gains. But if I only had 100 shares of MicroStrategy, then I would be worried. But if when the price was 150 earlier in the week, this was best case scenario. I was super psyched. And if it had finished the week that way, then I would have to pay $700 for each of these to roll. And the reason why I say that's what I'm rooting for every week is because these long calls should appreciate more than whatever's going to happen to the strikes on these shares. I think MicroStrategy might have to hit like 200 in 1 week or something in order to really just overcome these and put me in jeopardy of actually having to get these called away. So when MicroStrategy was 150 and these strikes were breached, that I was super psyched. And some people might breathe a sigh of relief, like, oh man, I'm so glad that the price is down under 143, and then on Friday, I'll just be able to buy these back for cheap. And the reason why that I don't agree with that is because when MicroStrategy was 150 a share, my account value, the total portfolio value, was like 7% more than it is right now. So I was making more money when the price of MicroStrategy was over my strikes. Now, my upside was still limited. So at that time, MicroStrategy was up 13% for the week, and my account was only up 10% for the week. So that's how this caps your maximum upside. But it only cut 3% off of my upside. And now that the price of MicroStrategy is back under my strikes, and I could technically close these for profit, I got paid $520 per contract, and I can buy them back for somewhere in between $280 and $350, probably $315-ish. And I could pocket $200 a contract. But my overall account value is still 7% less, like if I just completely cashed out and went to cash, my whole entire account portfolio would be better off with MicroStrategy above my strikes. Like I want I want my maximum upside to be just breached. Like go to 150, go to 175, go to whatever, go to 200. That would be more than fine. Because these long calls, all of this delta here, is my upside insurance against these shares. And so I'm least worried about these shares to the upside because one share is one delta. It doesn't fluctuate. So no matter whether MicroStrategy goes to 0 or goes to 500 a share, each share is one delta. I got 2,100 shares, 2,100 delta. But as I mentioned earlier, this 1,000 delta that I'm controlling with these long calls, if MicroStrategy goes high enough, these will be worth 1,500 delta. And then maybe 16, then maybe 17, then maybe 18. If MicroStrategy goes where some of us think it will go and where I hope it will go, I will absolutely cash in on these. So when I'm selling my covered calls against shares, I'm doing so for no other reason than to add leveraged long call positions. And the only reason I am doing that is because of the conviction that I have in MicroStrategy. Not financial advice, but if Bitcoin pumps, then the result of that would be MicroStrategy pumping. And if you've watched even one of the Quant Bros episodes, you'll see that there are a bunch of other factors that could also come into play, like MicroStrategy getting into the S&P 500. There's also a number of other large index funds that they should be qualifying for. So MSTR could have a lot of things going for it, which is why the shares will appreciate in dollar for dollar with the price. But what I'm truly interested in is the leveraged price appreciation. So I don't mind selling covered calls against my shares and putting them at risk for getting called away if it means every week getting to buy more and more long calls. And then, like, let's just pretend today was Friday and MicroStrategy was still at 150. Then I could take the profits from these long calls and I could use that to pay for the, whatever it would be, like $700 per contract times 20, so like 14 grand worth. I can just peel these off, peel some of these profits off to pay for this if I needed to. Now, I could just sell at the money covered calls at 150 and probably bring in at least another $500 a contract, so that's 10 grand right there. So really I would only have to peel off enough of these long calls to cover 4 grand. So, I mean, that's only 2 of these 478 DTE calls. Would be about 50 of these. Yeah, 5 times 400, 2,000. Oh, it only take about 10 of these to come up with 2,000. I did plenty of evaluations for these on optionsprofitcalculator.com. It's an excellent tool. Check that out if you want to know what any of these long calls could turn into based on time and an MSTR price. And so that's really the name of my game. Before I got so bullish on MicroStrategy, I would just simply, in a smaller account, I'd probably use some of the mining stock. Actually, the liquidity on HUT sucks right now. CLSK is my new darling right about now in an account where I can't afford to trade MicroStrategy. As soon as SMLR gets options, I'll take a look at them. That will be interesting if I can unload the miners and trade Semler. But before MicroStrategy entered the picture and I got so freakishly bullish on it, I would just, I'd sell a put here, or if I own shares, change to covered call, maybe sell a covered call here, and if the price went to 12.5 or 13 and they just got called away, that's fine. Then I could just start selling puts again. That's the two halves of the wheel strategy. I've got a couple of videos on those, but Adam in the Money also has excellent wheel videos. So does Kamikaze Cash. I've linked some of those videos before. But I just wanted to explain my thinking of why I do not at all get anxious when I sell a covered call at 143 and a MicroStrategy at 150. I'm totally stoked when that happens. That is not a fear-inducing moment. Like I said, if I only had 100 shares, and I didn't want those shares to get called away, that would scare me, because that actually did happen in my IRA. I had 100 shares when MicroStrategy was like 700 a share, and if I didn't have any covered calls, my IRA would probably be worth about double right now. So I did limit my upside pretty bigly there, but I got lucky. They got a split, so now I actually own some more shares in my IRA again. But I also I'm still trading some poor man's covered calls in the IRA, which is another synthetic way of trading when you cannot afford the shares. But yeah, my account was worth about 7% more than it is now when these strikes were breached. So even though it was going to cost me 14 grand to roll these bad boys, my overall account value, if I wanted to cash out, was worth more. So I always want the price of my stock to go up as much as possible. I'd be more than happy for it to just keep going. And the last time I had shares actually called away in MicroStrategy was when it went to 1,700 on its way up to 2,000. I had 300 shares, I think, and so I got 100 shares called away at 1,700. I used that to pay to roll the other two covered calls. And so that actually kind of worked out. Now, granted, I never did go back and pick up those shares, but what is this worth? So 20 times 20 is 400. So there's about 40 grand worth of options here. And this is almost 30. So 30 times 400, another 12 grand. So there's about 50 grand worth of options. And if I had just been buying shares, how many shares can I get for 50 grand? 100 shares would be 13. So 4 times that would be, yeah. I could pick up about 400 shares. So forcing me to sell these off at, which pre-split, or I guess would have been about 170, 1,700 a share. So yeah, it's almost kind of like easy mode, buy low, sell high for dummies, because every time you sell a covered call above your cost basis, my cost basis is 137, I guess, on MicroStrategy. Thought it was a little lower than that, but every time, if I sell a covered call anywhere above 137, and I'm forced, they get called away, that's selling high. So that's another reason why I don't fuss too much about it. Now, granted, I will be continuing to try to add to my shares position. I'm going to continue to try to add to my long calls positions. And, you know, every time I add 100 shares of stock, that's just one more covered call that I can sell. So the amount of returns that I can get is increasing exponentially if I'm adding 100 shares and then adding a covered call. If I do that, I should, you know, 2 weeks ago I was selling 20 covered calls. And then last week I sold 21 covered calls. If I add another 100 shares next week, I'll be selling 22 covered calls. And if that continues into infinity, then regardless of what MicroStrategy's price does, this account should appreciate. All right. I think I'll leave it there. And, well, actually, real quick, I always have these tabs in the background, and I don't know how visible they are, but I'm just going to share my TBR list. I think I made it through like the first chapter of Basic Economics. Anything by Thomas Sowell is worth a read. He's got some other good stuff as well. Check it out. This one's been on my TBR. I've had this tab open for probably 2 years straight. And I guess somebody came up with an idea that Christianity might have been like a mushroom cult or something, hallucinogenic mushroom cult. Anyway, I haven't gotten past the cover on this one. Manuel Smith, when I say no, I feel guilty, I guess this is a self-help category. I found this one on the Sidebar series on Ryan Stone's channel. Probably before you check out this one, and I guess I'm mainly talking to the guys here. I don't know. This one might be for women too. But No More Mr. Nice Guy is probably where everyone should start, where all the guys should start. This one, was it Stock Market Wizards? This one was recommended to me by the guy who got me into options like 4 years ago. And here's another one he recommended, Trend Following, Michael Covell. And then here's my Bitcoin offering. I'm on like page 60, and I've seen some of Jason Lowery's interviews, and they are always riveting. But this shit puts me to sleep on the plane every time I try to read it. So I'm like 1/6 of the way done. And this is basically written for the higher-ups in the military and the government, trying to convince them to adopt Bitcoin. And so it's about as boring as you can imagine a book would be that's directed for that audience. But the idea behind it is fascinating. So, like the first several chapters or whatever, 50 pages is just all just preparing you for the real meat, I'm hoping. So, can't wait to get to some more exciting parts, but this is the one that I'm actually currently working on. I've started and stopped Basic Economics like 3 times. But, all right. I don't know if that's considered an Easter egg or whatever, but I just thought I would throw that out there at the end, in case anybody made it this long. All right, be good, y'all.